Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Crafty Nihilist. And it's been a long time, but I feel this is a really important stream amongst all of the streams that I've done, and it fits in with all my research from before in the Lost Child, but this has got added potency. And I know that the Epstein files have been a focus for all sorts of podcasters and researchers, and the internet is full of many different people doing their different take on the Epstein files. But I wanted to focus particularly. I'm gonna focus on one girl's her files within the one girl's notebooks within the files, and what this reveals, or what this opens up, the possibilities that this opens up about so many aspects of what Epstein was doing and with his cronies. But it's really important. The title of this stream, Protect the Vanishing Children, I've taken it, as you can see, from this page of this notebook, which is within the Epstein files. And it's a really tragic and heart-wrenching series of writings by this girl about her experiences and what she was made to do. So much has been said, although not always in great detail, but about the abuses that women and young girls suffered at the hands of Epstein and Maxwell and all of that group. But there is extra layers to this, apart from the trafficking and the operations in terms of blackmailing and the intelligence. All of these are incredibly important, of course, but I think these extra layers that go into Epstein's fascination with creating life to recreating life in his image, or in the image of what he saw as maybe superior form of life or of humanity, and also for those rich and powerful that were in his circle, maybe trying to replicate those people as well. But I think this really does focus in on a genetics or eugenics program in one sense, but also it ties in with all these things about transhumanism, cloning. But there's definitely connections with the occult, but it's intricately bound up with the highest technology science that we have. And it just shows again that the science and the occult are interchangeable. They're just other words for the same thing. But I want to focus the top of this notebook as well. I was thinking of having this for the title, which was Through a Child's Eyes, because in a way, so much has been mentioned how the victims are not recognized, or they're glossed over, or even when mention is made, there's so many children that have, or young women that have suffered, the individual accounts somehow get lost. But I feel this one particular child's description of what happened was so powerful. And, you know, I have to give credit to Mind Unveiled, the channel, which I do recommend, because I first saw these documents, this specific aspect, through Mind Unveiled, and he's done 3, and I think soon to be a 4th series on Epstein and these aspects of the files. And I think it's a very different, well, it's going off into different tangents. I think James Corbett has just done a report as well on the baby making aspect of Epstein's operation. But yeah, let's get into this more. So it's obviously a series of like this, where they've taken photographs of notebooks where this girl has put down her experiences. Now, a lot of it is as it is here, where she's maybe cut out bits from newspapers or magazines and used those words. So when I say these are in the girl's own words, it is also not to try and look at it in an arty cultural theory type of a way, but her own words have to be hidden in a way, or she's using things cryptically, and she's using the words of others to show a story, and what's a real life story, but to reveal what's happening. And when you just read these things, the comments, what I wanted was a place where dreams did not stop at dawn. I won't let pain keep me from surviving. In the danger zone. Flashbacks. Now, just to move up. She also, a lot of what's written, and obviously you can see straight away what looks like blood. I hope it's not, but it looks like blood on these pages, and you'll see that it's written in a cipher. I think Mind Unveiled said that it was a particular cipher called rail fence cipher. So a lot of this notebook, she's her words, she's using this cipher, and as Mind Unveiled made a point, that shows that this girl is maybe not your ordinary girl. She's aware of this particular kind of cipher, and she's able to write extensive notes with it. So that shows a level of education. So it might be, and there's further things as we go through it that seem to suggest that she is part of a family, or grew up, or has been sort of groomed within, like she was part of some group where she was given certain knowledge or even some sort of education. So she wasn't merely an abuse victim. Merely, I use those words, that advisedly, but obviously she was suffering abuse, but there was a particular thing about this girl, and that shows that maybe there was also a targeting of particular types of girls, women, because of their genetic traits and how Epstein wanted to use them. So, as I say, the cipher. I'll just read some of the things. There's translations within the files themselves where obviously the FBI or whoever has made translations themselves of what the words mean. So some of these things, they're just heartbreaking, and I'm sorry if it's distressing for people, but it's important, I think, that we acknowledge these. And I think, although there's been reference to this girl and her experience in a number of the mainstream articles that I've seen, it doesn't go into all the detail. Just read some of it out. So sorry, Jeffrey, these things happen when your body had never been given time to properly heal. So it came out in the toilet and I didn't know what to do. So I just flushed the tiny little fetus. You have made me numb and I hate you for this. I hope I never have to see you again. I am not your personal incubator. Where is the baby? Where is Ghislaine? And then there's, again, from this notebook, she's obviously cut out this picture of a couple of little kids playing. And another further thing where she wrote, who could have predicted this? I should have. So sad this city could be beautiful if it weren't filled with monsters. The blood from Leon is no longer there. And this is probably a reference to the billionaire Leon Black, who is a known friend of Epstein. Black was been forced to resign from this Apollo Global Management. Relevance of that name for a start in that company, so like so many companies, Apollo Global Management. But he was also head of the Museum of Modern Art, and he's had to step down from that because of the allegations of his sexual misconduct with Epstein. He paid $158 million to Jeffrey Epstein. It's just an incredible money laundering operation. One of these situations where Epstein is sort of portrayed as this financial broker, but basically it's just, in these financial circles, it's just people knowing people with money and then getting funds from some and passing it to another, and it just goes around opening up sort of shell companies, moving it from one place to another, opening up companies, siphoning off millions to one another around the world. It's just like a global game of just money being just these figures. But also he was using these money that he was getting from these very rich people, and so much of it was being offered, being used to fund projects for really high profile scientists. And some of the biggest names in science, as I'm going to go through a bit further on, in various different fields, were being drawn in with the promise of money. And also there was various documentation that a number of these scientists were also taken to the Epstein Island and his mansion and involved in the parties that have become infamous. So I always thought, without having gone into detail about it, that it was intriguing that he spent all this time getting all these scientists under his influence. I mean, it seems obvious when we know about the probable intelligence connections with Mossad, and I'm sure that was also linked in with the CIA and other intelligence agencies as well. I know the mainstream press are trying to make out that it was a Russian connection. Quite clearly, Israel were prominent, of course, in this. But it wasn't just about getting influence with politicians and heads of major corporations. There was this other very deep layer for which they needed scientists. To go back to this girl's tragic story, more from her notebook through the cipher. Tomorrow is the halfway ultrasound for Jeffrey. This one stuck. After they took the first baby who survived, and the early miscarriage, I think it was called, I no longer feel like a person, but a vessel. Will they take this one too? Who is the first one? Where did Ghislaine go? She is never around. I can't let myself get attached. I am not old or mature enough or even in the place to have a baby that I'd be responsible for. I am not even able to focus on anything. I had to go to eating disorder treatment prior to being in this situation again. I missed the entire full semester of school. I am so very exhausted. My body feels so tired. will I ever be free? I am such a monster. And this is a later, obviously after a child was born, taken from her. I am such a monster. I didn't console her. I can't unhear her screams. They haunt me. I couldn't even bring myself to look at her. I am a monster. I deserve to be haunted by her screams. I am so sorry. I am so broken. Within these tragic words, we can see a lot there. Ghislaine is obviously, as has been referred to by others, you know, she obviously, I guess in many cases, befriended the girls, and maybe they felt safer with her, another, you know, a woman, and she obviously promised them certain things maybe, and then brought them into Epstein's circle, where they were used for all sorts of things. In this case, this girl has obviously had multiple pregnancies, and clearly from what she was saying, she was still at school, so she was still a child. The understandable trauma, causing eating disorders, physical as well as mental trauma and exhaustion. I think, I mean, I have sort of seen and heard certain people on the internet or commentators, and you know, trying to make excuses for Epstein, or shall I say, sort of minimize what the abuse, and you know, sometimes saying, oh well, you know, they were really just sort of barely legal women that he used, as if that made it okay. But oh, they weren't really, you know, it wasn't really children, or not quite. It was, you know, just in that sort of teenage, almost womanhood stage, you know. And others say, oh well, you know, they would have known what they were doing, that sort of thing. Clearly this story, amongst other reports, and someone, I think there's the photos that came out with the Epstein files, this is quite clearly that children, young children, were being abused. And of course, with the story that this girl is telling us, I mean, it's child abuse on two different levels. Obviously the girl herself, but then she is being made to give birth to babies, to children, and to more children. So they're born into this, and we don't know. No one seems to know what actually is, you know, what's happened to these babies that were produced. And we can imagine that this isn't the only girl that suffered like this. So how many babies were there? How many babies were produced? Just to keep going with also from the same girl, more of the cutouts. Our finance department deals with all the paperwork. Unfortunately, the finance department is also, and that other word is family. Who knew I was born a slave? There's a number of references through these about her mother, and her mother being on the warpath. And it does seem to be, like I mentioned before, that she was born into a family that already had a connection with Epstein, or maybe with, whether it's some in secret societies, and you know, Mind Unveil's second of his Epstein series talked about connections with secret societies like the Zodiac Club that Epstein was involved with. So I think there's probably different levels in terms of the victims of the abuse, and I'm sure there would have been a number of poor girls that were drawn in, and there would have been ones who were just sadly just chosen just to be victims, to, as I say, for the entrapments and the intelligence operations. But I think there was another level. Perhaps this girl seems to be an example of that. So she's sort of suggesting that she herself was born in to this sort of activity, or that people of these groupings who wanted to do these things, she was like in a family firm, and that's why she was sort of targeted for this. So maybe she was produced in the same way, and it's something that's gone on for generations. We just move these along a bit. More very sad from this girl having a baby just taken away from her. My heart belonged to her. She was so very beautiful. She was perfect. I can't bring myself to write what happened. I am beyond broken. I only got 10 to 15 minutes to hold and feed her before they took her. She is mine. I want her back. Distraught. I know this is tough stuff to go through, but I think it 100%, this girl's story needs to be shown. And I mean, she would be a woman now, and I hope after such trauma that she's been able to grow and repair herself in some way to live a life now. But what has happened to her, and what's happened to her babies? Help me, please. Can't anyone find me? My heart is gone. April 22nd, I had no choice. I wasn't ready, and she wasn't ready. My mother had found me, and it was urgent. After so many bonding moments with Jeffrey Ghislaine, their baby inside me. So she was carrying, so she says she was carrying a baby from Jeffrey and Ghislaine. Now, what Mind Unveil was uncovering, and as I say, I'm going to look a bit more myself, is the idea of, with all the technological and scientists that he was connected with and was drawing in, amongst those were fertility experts. There was the gene editing CRISPR expert George Church, who's mentioned extensively in the files. A number of others that I'm going to go through as well. So a word that the girl used in an earlier note, that she was a vessel, and obviously she talked a bit about she was an incubator, and that's an interesting word I'll go into later. So she was it seems that she was impregnated, not perhaps just in this case in terms of being physically impregnated by Epstein or even one of his associates, but maybe, or in terms of what the girl thought she was carrying, she was maybe thought that she had been impregnated by an egg that was fertilized by Epstein from Maxwell or something like that. I mean, it's such a twisted concept, but again, she's describing how these two were bonding with her. So they were obviously trying to do all the manipulation that she was, I guess, that she was loved and she was carrying this child for them or something like that. But then obviously it turned after that time. She says then Maxwell wouldn't even look at me. So, just I suppose a classic. Again, this links in again with all those things like MK Ultra and all those other experimental projects, traumatizing children, but ways of manipulation where people will be befriended maybe, and so they get an attachment with whoever it was, some sort of scientist or something, and then it will be broken and there'll be something traumatic, and it will give this idea of creating a disassociation, not only breaking people's spirit but breaking them psychologically, breaking their soul. So yeah, she's saying regarding Maxwell, we said nothing to one another and I was so confused. When we arrived at Palm Beach, I was taken to a house close to Jeffrey's, I think. I was alone except for a new driver. Not all the words are clear because there's a confidential thing across it. An elderly French lady whose picture's on the wall. She had a thick accent, was kind, said she had been born to deliver babies and been doing so before I was born. Similar as the last one, with a shot and something, but too much blood with so much water, an unbearable pain. She got her hands inside me and was extremely worried. I didn't understand something about the baby facing the wrong way and putting pressure on the placenta. Things would have to be different. She said I had to be brave and strong and listen to her directions so she could help safe to get the baby out. I was terrified seeing so much blood on the bed and floor and started to panic. Then the baby was born. She let me hold her and washed her. She smelled so good. But only after maybe 15 minutes, Mr. M came to take her away, and I was hysterical, begging for more time. He said those horrible girls were in the car. I wouldn't let her go. The old woman promised me she would be taken care of. I had to let her go. 5 inches long with beautiful long fingers. I am dead inside. Reference here, the same girl, and she's talking about Jean-Luc Brunel, who's a known associate of Epstein and died, I think, in a cell. Was it in France? But someone who'd been convicted of being involved with trafficking with Epstein. She says Jean-Luc Brunel is a disgusting pig with bad breath, and I am almost positive does these disgusting things because he is struggling with maybe being gay. 6 weeks wasn't even given before being sent back. Maybe she means after the baby was born, she got sent back to be used again. Punishment for trying to run. Why can no one help me? Ghislaine is gone. I am so lost and my heart is broken. Is this my destiny? When you're learning about life, the world is your classroom. We live where you live. Never protected from the family firm. What I was mentioning before, it seems this girl anyway, there were family connections, and that she was, I suppose that's why she was used as in their eyes as a breeding, as someone to breed, to produce whatever it is that they wanted to, a form of life, a new baby that they wanted to produce. I'm hoping that she got out in some respect, but I don't know. My friend, something redacted, realized much of everything and came to get me out of Mary's. She made me leave all things of value on the bed. She put all my belongings in trash bags. I have maybe avoided NM, whatever that is, or who that is. I have been staying with friends, but never more than 2 or 3 nights because my mother is on the warpath. So again, whoever she is, whoever her mother is, seems to be connected with this, but in the negative way, obviously, of that she's put her child up to be used this way. And then someone else redacted has been great, saw me changing and knows about the baby. He said he promises to help me and we will figure out what to do. So I guess, more tragic stuff. When I go to sleep at night, I know I've done my best. She went from being a beautiful young something. She came in like a lamb and went out like a lioness. Now, this is interesting as well. Amidst the tragedy, close your eyes, close your eyes, close your eyes. Don't speak. She doesn't talk. I can't stop shaking, and it's been a week. A decision was made, but I can't tell Jeffrey. This is interesting that something happened here, and it was like Epstein didn't know about it, or that's what she was told, the girl. And so that suggests as well that Epstein, there were other people. Well, I know we sort of know this because a lot of people, know that he was an intelligence asset and had all sorts of powerful people. So he was a manipulator, but he was manipulating on behalf of someone else or other bodies, other groups. So there was deeper levels. A decision was made, but I can't tell Jeffrey. So although he was an instigator of many things, this shows that there was some things going on where other people weren't keeping him in the loop, or they had their own ideas. These things happen. Why didn't I close my eyes fast enough? The doctor was different again, I think from Israel. There's no getting away from it. Well, there's no getting away from the mainstream is trying to deflect and say he was working for Russian intelligence. But I mean, at some level, I think these are all connected. So I'm not pro-Russia either, and they're all capable of doing evil things. But beyond all else, obviously, Epstein was an asset of Mossad. So, I mean, this all, as far as I can see, she talked about being in Palm Beach, and this all takes place in America. So the doctor being from Israel, why would that be? Well, obviously, the whole thing is evil and clandestine, but seems notable this particular doctor was from Israel. And as I say, the fact that Epstein was maybe cut out of the loop of this, what was happening here. So maybe somebody or some other organization was trying to do something here. He had kind eyes, but didn't speak directly to me. This was different. A shot and those rod-like things had a hook and so much pain. Ghislaine said to push all the pain away. So Maxwell was there at this point, even though Epstein had been kept out of the decision that was happening here to get deliver the baby at this time, shall we say. And I suppose obviously everyone, but it's known, of course, Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, was very much high up or big with Mossad and all his connections. So who knows? Maybe in some respects Maxwell was at the very least equal, or in some respects maybe the likes of Mossad were going through her in some respects, and not Epstein. She said to close my eyes and put my hands over my eyes, but I didn't close them because of those tiny cries. I am so lost. He was right. A couple of months and 2 pink lines with a hold on being with others until after it was positive. I want to die. Why didn't she protect me? So this is maybe a time when she's discovered that she's pregnant again. As long as I'm wearing what you want, there is no respect for me as a human. I am nothing but your property and incubator. Again, she used that term because she's just being used as a breeding vessel. You only trust me when I'm under your complete control. I will never trust another man ever. I am the only one who provides and sacrifices everything. I give and give out of terror, and you take hold of me. You need me to continue. Now, this is where she is saying that she's obviously been told, or she's found out, that she's selected for being the mother of these children, or the using children, because quote, superior gene pool. Why me? It makes no sense. Why my hair color and eye color? That feels very Nazi-like. But in thinking about these stupid, insane theories he has, I guess in his mind it makes sense. The piano and something comments are made to convince me this is right and will create perfect offspring, he calls them. I don't think it works that way, and it's making me hate playing altogether. Piano or viola, I am starting to resent them both. I miss the person I was before I was made into what feels as a human incubator. So she's been selected for genetic traits that she has, the way she looks. But also there's this talk about, getting into playing a musical instrument. So there's this theories that I think Epstein had, but going from a lot of the ideas in science, in genetics, and I'm going to mention a bit more later. Again, one of these there's been some coincidences in terms of books that I've been reading around this time, and then this stuff landed with Mind Unveiled's videos and other stuff around Epstein. And I think somehow, just in terms of my personal connection, if you like, with things that have been said, obviously there's all the history of my writing about the lost child and the rest of it, but just coincidences of seemingly unconnected books on different subjects, but somehow tying in, I believe. And just recently, when I was dashing out the door to go to work and needed a new book to read on the bus, in my lunch break, whatever, and I grabbed this I bought some time ago, Rupert Sheldrake's book, A New Science of Life. I heard him talk a number of times and sort of read little bits on the internet about his interesting theories about morphic resonance, this idea about fields, and how and I've been reading in these early chapters when he's going through, and I know this is a revision, I think it came out originally in the 80s, talking about how genetics, after they mapped the human genome, and then they've done it with a number of other species, and this idea that they've got that you can break things down genetically, so certain genes will be in charge of different, not just different human character, physical characteristics that people have, the building blocks of how people look or how different organisms will structure, but also in terms of people's mental abilities or consciousness. And it all sort of ties in again with this sort of mechanistic, scientific, materialist view that everything's sort of like a machine, and you can break things down into these operating parts and how little things click together and levers and switches, and it's that sort of, and that you can then predict how things will work. But things don't work like that in terms of the natural world, the cosmic, the universe, shall we say. And I was interested reading, as I say, this was outside of this, what here about, and he was saying, genetics, it's been a bit of discussion in, biology, genetics. They actually thought that they could, work out once they map the human genome, and from that, it won't be long before we can work out all these different genes, and they store this and that kind of thing about consciousness or the way people think and behave, and we can work things out from different genes about how people, and things will be passed on genetically then to replicate different generations, if you like. Genetics will pass on different things in terms of a psychological thing. And I'm getting that impression here of what they were thinking, in terms of like this girl, if she's, if she's a musician, if she's got these different creative or intellectual training, and then that will then be fed into her genes somehow, which she could then pass on to this offspring, which they're, whatever they want to do with this offspring, but they are choosing her because they want certain genetic traits, not just physical appearance, but seemingly in terms of intellect and behavior. And maybe this connects in again with the idea, she was someone that been taught how to these ciphers, so she had some connection to certain bits of knowledge which wouldn't have been the normal thing that, well, that the majority of adults wouldn't know, certainly kids of school age. But again, I think, well, funny enough, I agree that the girl herself was saying, I don't think it works that way. So this idea that playing the piano, making the mother be creative or have certain attributes, and that these would then pass on, that somehow this would absorb in the DNA to pass on. And she was saying, I don't think it works that way, and I don't think it works that way either. But I think it shows a lot about the concepts which a lot of scientists have, and as I say, these very prominent scientists who are so influential in these fields were involved with Epstein. And it is that idea, I think, although maybe they started to adapt their thinking, but it is the idea that they can, by reproducing certain sort of mechanical things, that will automatically then produce a certain kind of offspring. And I think it's this idea that you can manufacture something and create it in the image that you want, which is a classic. It seems, well, it's so much of what science is about is doing that. And I guess, there's been numerous stories, parables, whatever you want to call it, talking about this as obsession of science and warning about it. Obviously, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, I know there's a lot of possible connections with her as well, but this idea of, or the attempt of, making the image of a human, or the image of the scientist, making them sort of godlike, and the idea that they can create life and that they can do it in a way to fulfill something that they have in their minds. It's the grandest arrogance, I suppose. But in many ways, that does sum up the mindset of the people that are in power. So it's the mindset of this materialist scientific agenda. It's also the mindset of these people that are in political control, or the people that are controlling the puppets that are supposedly in political control, and the corporate power as well. It's the idea that they can manipulate human life, i.e. the rest of the population. They can manipulate in terms of destroying people's lives, but also they can manipulate in terms of creating people into the image that they want. So let me just keep going a little bit more. Now, this seems like a massive departure, I know. But I was talking about the coincidence of books that I was reading at the same time as the Epstein files landed, and in particular when I saw the Mind Unveiled videos. And when I watched the first one, I was just literally coming to the end of reading this book, The Black Alchemist by Andrew Collins. Chap I've mentioned a number of times and got to know a little bit from doing the old Megalithomania tour around Turkey and stuff. And he obviously now is very much into the idea of researching of ancient cultures, ancient sites, and all that sort of thing, and the earth mystery side of things, if you like. But in sort of earlier phase of his life, he's had quite an incredible life, Andrew, but he used to be involved around this time when he wrote this. So this was during the 1980s, in what people term questing. So although Andrew himself doesn't claim to be a psychic, although like most of the population, I would say he experienced certain things which are outside the normal understanding. But he's worked with a number of people who are very psychically abled, and questing is sort of a thing where people go around, they try and, whether it's get to the bottom of like an ancient mystery or find an ancient artifact, and they use it by trying to find physical clues in the landscape and around about, but also from psychic people doing remote viewing, trying to connect psychically with different places and that sort of thing. And this Black Alchemist book, apparently it became quite a cult classic, as the NME quote says there. And in it, Andrew relates his true story, how he, a friend of his, Bernard, who was a very strong psychic, he started to pick up and connect with, not by design, but I think because their paths were crossing and they were in certain places, and they psychically got connected to this guy who they termed the Black Alchemist, and over the course of the story, they could tell that this character was obviously into the dark aspects of the occult, and he was, as they got towards the end of this book, although that I know there's a sequel which I'm going to have to get one of these days, but the culmination of the story on this book, at least, he realized that this black alchemist was trying to create new life, was trying to create like an antichrist type of a figure, whether that was going to be an actual physical child in a sort of Omen, Rosemary's Baby sort of way. And I must say that reading the horrific stories that the girl was describing, it made me think of Rosemary's Baby. This idea of someone being impregnated, if you like, with an evil force, and to produce some life which was then going to be used for nefarious means. And there are so many references to the occult within the Epstein files. I do understand. I think it's right. I mean, I know Adam Green on No More News is sort of, I mean, he's by no means the only one, but it's sort of railed against a lot of the stuff that's gone on the internet, which is sort of jumping to conclusions or making inferences a lot of the references and coded language within the documents. And people have jumped to, oh my God, it's talking about this and that happening with babies and ritual sacrifice and Satanism. And there's references to and hints of lots of things. I agree, maybe some people are jumping ahead. And I think there is a danger, although I think it's quite clear there's enough, even without jumping ahead or making too many assumptions about certain things. This is giving credence to so many of those so-called conspiracy theories, which people have ridiculed for decades, about the abuses that the powerful do and how so much of it is connected to occult practices. And again, as I've obviously talked before, the occult just means hidden, as we know. And studies of the occult, of magic, of pagan rituals, don't in of themselves make somebody evil, because there's a lot which I've just looking at people I know and stuff like that have looked into these things, and they aren't in and of themselves evil. It's the idea, I suppose energy is neutral, it's how you use it, and that's the same with these forces. So I think there is a lot of distraction in terms of where so much goes out in these files and the way that people have talked about it, which will then make some people say, oh, well, this is ridiculous. It's so nonsensical that they're talking about Satanism and things like that. And a lot of people will dismiss it because they feel it's just, in some ways they just can't face anything so shocking. And of course, many of the so-called materialist perspective will say, well, this is obviously nonsense. And they will throw everything out, or they will throw most things out and just say, well, oh, this again is silly conspiracy theories, even though so much that has come out is proof of what people have said. Now, Um, I think there's of like all these things. There's so many different levels going on. So there is these distractions. At the same time, there are these dark ritualistic practices happening. That doesn't then mean that there's not the very real material deceptions, the geopolitical stuff, the Mossad, other intelligence agencies, probably the Rothschilds mentioned frequently. So if people don't want to look at any of the occult stuff, then that's absolutely fine, and they can just concentrate on these very real, material things. I think a lot of the distraction idea of making things extreme so people turn away from and say it's nonsense reminds me of the satanic panic of the 1980s, which was the decade when The Black Alchemist was written. And I think a lot of that, again, was put out there because now any mention of satanic ritual abuse will so often eventually get shut down. I was like, oh, this was all dealt with in the 80s. It's unscrupulous people creating false memories or just outright lying about what happened and coaching or tricking kids into saying these things and making assumptions from what they've said and all these sort of things. So that did a great job of meaning that any talk of satanic ritual abuse was shut down. So maybe there's a danger of that trying to happen again. But I think it's important to thus keep tying it together that Epstein and his cronies and his ilk were looking at these ritualistic practices, but it was as one and the same as their connections with these ultra high-tech, ultra modern scientific processes. And they were using them in the same way as people involved in so-called magic have been doing for centuries. And we know the basis of chemistry comes from alchemy. Basically, our modern science, the supposedly materialistic, everything outside the material is obviously nonsensical. But in actual fact, even before you get to the modern scientific theories like quantum, etc., that make, that contain so much with any talk of the paranormal with different dimensions. But in terms of the physical scientists, they were based on people that were studied alchemy and many other occult things. I've talked before about John Dee, and Interesting Mind Unveiled has also done lots of that on the idea of creating homunculus, these creatures that were supposedly created from nothing in jars and that sort of thing. And that is 100% what the scientists are trying to do now in terms of their transhumanism, AI, genetics, cloning, all of these things that are constantly mentioned within the Epstein files with these world-leading experts on these different fields. But they are trying to create life in a vessel, whether that's a robot or tragically the poor girl who had the baby taken from her. But so much of this is about trying to create life. And the Black Alchemist, he was trying to create this Antichrist. He was trying to create it out of thin air because he felt that he had this power for all these research into ancient magic, ancient rituals. And to me, this struck a chord. Again, I was reading this sort of the final chapters around the time of these Mind Unveiled videos. Bernard has a vision, as I say, sort of psychically connects with this black alchemist, and he hears the plan to create this birth of a new being, quote, turning air into water and water again into blood and solidifying it into flesh to form a new human creature, a boy, and produce a much nobler work than God, the so named creator. For he made man from the earth, but I from the air, a much more difficult matter. And another thing I would say is, I think Freeman Fly said, even if you don't believe in the occult, those in power do. So I would even say to anyone here or anyone listening who's of a completely materialist bent and like, oh, this is all nonsense, you should still take note of it. The fact that those in power, and I think I noted how it came out in the mainstream just again the other day about Bohemian Grove. I know this has been known for years, but again, to many of the normies out there, they'll still be closed their eyes to that sort of thing. But again, there's the incredibly rich and powerful dressing up in robes and going through these rituals. And although they would say that, oh, there's no actual sacrifice there, it's just almost sort of a cosplay. But the fact that they're doing these rituals and they're seeing it as a way to maximize and harness the power which they use to control us. As I say, even if you think that the actual idea that these rituals could actually work, just the fact that these people have that sensitivity about them, then I think people have to take notice of it. One thing, again, just in this final couple of chapters of The Black Alchemist, which I was reading just before these videos came down, the date which Collins worked out as it was approaching that the Black Alchemist was going to try and produce this life, this was all happening in 1988, and he realized that the crucial time for the ritual would be the 8th of August on that year. So all the 8s, if you like, 88. Collins was explaining that 888 has a similar potency to 666, signifying in alchemy, at least, the number of completion of the great work. I would say this is what Epstein is trying to do. Obviously, great, not great, totally the opposite of great in terms of for everyone else, but in terms of his mentality or those around him. So Collins went on to say about this date, it was going to be used by numerous different pagan and occultists around the country, including, quote, a group of around 20 individuals were to gather in the ruins of Fotheringay Castle in Northamptonshire, the site of the beheading of Mary Queen of Scots in 1587. Here they were to conduct a long drawn out ritual to enable Mary Queen of Scots' soul to incarnate as the Duke and Duchess of York's first child, due on the 8th of August. And he says in brackets, Princess Beatrice was subsequently born at 8:18 p.m. on that day. And I was just like, whoa, because of course, the Duke and Duchess of York, the royal formerly known as Prince Andrew, and this was all, I was reading this just a few days before, obviously, his arrest on his 66th birthday. And I agree again as well, this is being stage managed, and although it's absolutely great to see the scumbags arrested, Whether anything will seriously happen to them is another question, but it wouldn't surprise me if a few of them are thrown under the bus, as is sort of starting to happen. And it's possibly like another, they can say, oh, we're going to reset things. Oh, look, oh yeah, this old guard of people were so corrupt and evil. We're gonna kick back against them because this is like the new order where we don't do that kind of thing. Trust us, trust the new people in charge. But as we know, they're still going to have the same masters above them, whatever the form of government that they put in. But yeah, Sarah Ferguson as well, very prominent within the Epstein files, amongst so many others, of course. And there's various references to her meeting Epstein with Beatrice, who I would have been, I think these emails were about 2009. So I suppose, yeah, if she was born in 88, then she's going to be at that point sort of 20 or something. Epstein talking about someone who's redacted meeting up with Beatrice and Ferguson and Andrew. They met Beatrice and said she was terrific. It's probably nothing. It just struck me, if nothing else, this idea, as I say, that from occult, black magic, and however many horror stories, horror films you want to see, like I mentioned, Rosemary's Baby and The Omen, this idea of an antichrist or creating a life that's going to then come out to change the world, a new world order. And it seems to me just different wording for the same thing with what these people were trying to do in a scientific way and a sick child trafficking way as well. And Sarah Ferguson as well, another little link. But again, opens up so many questions. In September 2011, emails to Epstein from a redacted email address, 3 years after Epstein convicted of sex crimes, message signed off by Sarah mentioning the Duke and congratulating Epstein on the birth of a child. Don't know if you're still on this BBM, BlackBerry Messenger, but heard from the Duke that you have had a baby boy, the first email says. Even though you never kept in touch, I'm still here with love, friendship, and congratulations on your baby boy, Sarah. Kiss, kiss. Then a follow-up message to Epstein 8 minutes later. You have disappeared, the email says. I did not even know you were having a baby. It was so crystal clear to me that you were only friends with me to get to Andrew. And that really hurt me deeply, more than you will ever know. So it's never been publicly confirmed that Epstein had children. And if they're accurate, the boy would now be a teenager. So whether that was the boy, the girl in those ciphers, but again, it seems, sadly, I'm sure, to have happened so many times. So this, how many? What happened to this boy? Obviously, he's not officially credited as being offspring of Epstein. So who was he given to? Where did he end up? So then we excuse me for a second. Let me just move on the images now. So this had been in the media some years ago. How Epstein was supposed to have said to, I think, a number of people, some scientists, different people sort of heard it said that he planned to impregnate 20 women at a time. I don't think in the natural way, but financier accused of sex trafficking hoped to seed human race with his DNA. I remember this being mentioned a while ago. Jason Burmas had sort of, to credit to him, actually mentioned more about, because this was supposed to have happened around the Zorro Ranch. And I read something where there's is it in Arizona where that ranch is, but the state authorities are just, oh well, they're going to reopen the investigation around Zorro Ranch. Well, that, you know, brilliant. I mean, what could possibly have induced them to actually go and investigate it 20 years ago, or whenever this first started coming out about Epstein? I remember Burma saying, you know, why haven't they investigated? Why haven't they gone in there? Or if they have, they haven't publicized it. And that seemed to be obvious. You know, obviously Epstein Island has been predominantly maybe in the media in terms of, you know, the parties, the Leader Express plane going out there. And then there's been a lot of mention as well of his New York mansion, but less about the Zorro Ranch. And again, it seems to be that this aspect of Epstein has been given even less. Obviously, so much has been repressed, or it's been, you know, even now things are redacted. We haven't got everything out, and people aren't. There's still lots of people getting away with it. And the Mind Unveiled podcast started, actually, it showed a clip of Tucker Carlson discussing the files with Ian Carroll, and Carlson refers to the fascination of Epstein and his circle of influence with genetics and biotechnology, an obsession with making changes to humans, behaving in a godlike way, like someone, quote, involved in the supernatural would. And I think Mind Unveiled sort of flashed up their sort of signaling what actually happened. So whether Mind Unveiled sort of suggesting that Carlson might be a controlled opposition there, which I know a lot of people think about. But yeah, so one of these articles I read that talked about the plan to impregnate 20 women at a time, saying, well, there's no evidence this ever came to fruition. Well, I would say things like that girl's report, whether that specifically is one of these, but it's definitely evidence that there was impregnation of women, or sadly girls, with the very clear purpose of putting DNA out into the world, whether it's Epstein's, or whether it's from others. Now there was the emails backwards and forwards about a DNA kit being sent from the company 23andMe. I think Green Tea mentioned that earlier in the chat. Sorry, I haven't got a chance to follow everyone's comments in the chat, but just caught something out of my eye. But yeah, 23andMe is something, and I think the head of 23andMe is some mentioned in the files. Is going to, you know, different meals, and so many of the, you know, it's crazy. You know, some of these like lunches where they have, and you've got like Bezos there, Musk, Peter Thiel, you know, a ridiculous list of, like, you know, Bill Gates, whatever, you know, tech, the head of all these massive tech companies, billionaires, and with these like high expert scientists in all these different fields, you know, all gathered in the same room. And it's going around more than just getting influence. It's there's a definite plan there. So there was a kit sent from 23andMe to Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the ruler of Dubai, and this is via the Sultan bin Sulayem, who's mentioned a lot and is supposedly the person who sent the torture video to Epstein. So there's sort of further emails. So it came back, the kit came back, but then the 23andMe was something. Oh, we can't do anything with it because it's come from a foreign country. So then they had a workaround where they'd get it transported to an address in like America, and then it can be sent from there. So they were getting DNA from this sheikh, and I'm sure he wasn't the only one. So as Mind Unveiled was saying, what seems to be happening, perhaps they were getting DNA from these powerful people, and perhaps then using that to impregnate women, just try maybe in a sort of a try and use it for cloning. There's other emails referring to designer babies and talking about human cloning in 5 years. There's an email exchange with Brian Bishop, who is a Bitcoin billionaire, I believe. He talks about the human race never being the same again, and then being in a position soon to take pre-orders. Mentions a lab in Ukraine. Another little web, little section of the web of what's going on there, and we know labs there involved with all sorts of experimentation. And another reason why the Americans and other people want doing so much to invest in Ukraine and the coup there perhaps as well. So this Brian Bishop estimated this human cloning company would cost $9.5 million to fund for 5 years, or $6 million for 3 years. An email, I'm not sure if I've got it on here. These are the emails, though I apologize. It's probably so tiny that you won't be able to read it. But one of the quotes from it says, "This funding gets us out of our self-funded garage biology phase to the first live birth of a human designer baby and possibly a human clone within 5 years." And this email was in 2018. "Once we reach the first birth, everything changes and the world will never be the same again, much less the human species." Now, whether they achieve this, there's lots of speculation, of course. Officially, human cloning doesn't happen and all that sort of thing. Again, another coincidence of books. Again, I recently read this, The Rise of the Clones, Cabbage Patch Babies by Guy Anderson. And he talked about a lot of speculation where some scientists around the world have said that they have perfected human cloning. There's others who talk about the possibility of it, but it's not official. I would expect the technologies the technologies there. I mean, just seeing from these emails, certainly the energy, the intentions there, the money was there, the direction of getting, as I say, all of these people together, from tech billionaires to genetic experts, and of course all the financial muscle you can possibly imagine when you got to talk sheikhs, Rothschilds, all the richest people in the world funding it. Not to mention, as governments and intelligence agencies and military and all the rest of it. You can't really imagine that the technology is not there, or at least the technology is definitely there that they try these things. As we know from where like animals have been cloned, and then there's been health problems. The cloning is, so it's produced a creature, it's produced an animal, like, you know, Dolly the sheep and all that. But then they've not been, there's been health problems. They haven't necessarily lived very long, or they've had difficulties where there's been some genetic things that have, the cloning has produced something that's not quite right, because they're doing something that's not natural. That's probably why. So perhaps it's quite horrible to even think about it, really, but just coming to my head. But, you know, sadly, again, you know, maybe they have done this with humans, and but, you know, it hasn't ended well. But we wouldn't know about it. But, you know, the title of my live stream, Protect the Vanishing Children. So, as I say, there's these children, not only the victims of the abuse and the girls that were made to give birth to these babies, but then what happened to those babies? So they're the real vanishing children. Where are they? What happened to them? I sincerely hope they're living healthy lives now, but who are they? Who do they think their parents are? But yeah, if they were the result of some sort of experiment in seeding genes, trying to clone genes of Epstein, of rich people, the powerful. But again, you've got this eugenics idea of, and I have read quotes, again, it's people saying they heard Epstein say things about, oh, you know, the poor and unwashed, shall we say, you know, and to use quotes from other so-called elites, you know, the useless eaters and that sort of thing. They don't want us, and they want to replace us with, well, we know there's the transhumanism thing, and there's lots about that in the Epstein files. Again, robotics, etc. I'll mention a bit more in a minute. Recreating life in that respect, but also in terms of the physical human life with cloning and with genetic modification. As I say, one of the scientific experts that's mentioned a lot is George Church, who's an expert in CRISPR technology, which is this gene editing. So the idea, again, you can edit people's genetics, their DNA, so that will then lead to, of course, the positive thing they talk about is trying to take out things like genetic preponderance to diseases or things like that, to traits that you know, people don't want to be passed on to their children. But as I say, there was the quote in these emails about, you know, designer babies and doing it like as a production thing. And yeah, so that's the idea that you can actually edit the genes to produce the kind of child that you want. So that, again, is this sort of Frankenstein idea that you can make life how you want it. And I mean, I'm not a Christian. I don't have a religion, but I certainly believe, if you like, in the natural order of things, and if you want to put it that way. And I believe that there's more to life than the material, and there's if you like, a soul consciousness, and there's different levels of consciousness, and why I'm interested in things like Sheldrake's idea, morphic resonance. These are where so many, there are a lot of scientists now who are very much connected with these ideas of consciousness. I've talked before about plasma, very in-depth scientific researched ways of looking at the universe, which is what science should be about, but not reducing it, redacting it, to use what they've been doing in the Epstein files in a different sense, not trying to restrict it to the mechanical way of and that, I suppose, is a lot of what it is, you know, that you have in this idea that life is mechanical, life is like, it's all just, we're just machines. And that way of life, it either enables the psychopath or it fits in with the psychopathic worldview. So it's like the idea of things that are machines, then you can do what you want with them. If there's not, in the warped mindset, that gives, you know, maybe permission to manipulate as they want. All right, let me just move on a bit. I hope people are hanging in there now. This is an interesting email, though perhaps not someone that you would just move on a moment. Let me just check where we are. Okay, so Michelle Riley, who's not one of the most high profile people in all the Epstein files, but she has lectured at MIT. She's to do with quantum computing and that sort of area. But she went to Epstein Island, you know, amongst so many. But this email pointed out by Mind Unveiled. Thanks, Jeff. You asked for fun projects. I think we're mostly starving for great conspiracies today. 10 to 12 person coordinated secrets. What about a new Rosicrucianism of sorts? And that interesting reference to these old secret societies, Rosicrucianism. Again, that came out. Some people believe it started with John Dee and his ideas when he was touring around Europe, and then that in later years got taken up in a sort of an underground thing, and then became this Rosicrucianism. And it's again this idea, well, in the day it was a lot talking about the ancient knowledge and ways of developing power, if you like, but I suppose, you know, power in terms of knowledge and ways of understanding the universe, but perhaps also trying to control things. Again, it's one of those things where, you know, I read positive and negative reports on, well, from Freemasonry, Knights Templar, Rosicrucianism, and so much of the conspiracy sphere, Rosicrucianism, like all of those things, is part of power groupings that are trying to use knowledge to do ill on the population. But then, you know, I hear other people that I've spoken to or read things, and it's like, well, you know, no, it's getting these old knowledge, trying to keep it from people who would misuse it and use it for good. I mean, I think quite likely that there's I think quite likely a lot of these organizations, so we say societies, over the centuries have probably been infiltrated. They've probably been again, the idea, like just the occult in general, ritual, ritualistic magic in general, it can be positive, it can be negative. It's how people use it. But it does seem that so many people on the darker side have got into these power structures or using it. But yeah, what about a new Rosicrucianism of sorts? A Jejun Institute style blurred reality stroke fiction negging of your enemies would be pretty damn fun. I mean, a lot of these people, even though they're geniuses, they are a bit illiterate and what the bloody hell they're going on about. But anyway, what are your thoughts on funding and constructing your own intelligence agency? Well, maybe he doesn't need to because he's already part of all these other ones. But I'd also like to do an exclusive science salon sort of thing at a place like Esalen, which I had to look up, but it's like some sort of, looks a bit like a new agey retreat thing in Big Sur, California. Been there since the 60s, where sort of people go for personal development. Or maybe in Little St. James, which is Epstein's Island. Experimentation with philosophers stroke scientists examining physiological stuff while considering artificial intelligence epistemology. So a bit of a word salad, but talking about people experimenting physiological stuff. So what are they experimenting on physiologically? Outside of this, I tend to think of my mate preferences as evidence of gentlemen to pay attention to. Caveat emptor, the buyer beware. Like any decent 20 trader, you should estimate various lags, regime changes to seek relevant trends. High-profile island orgies also independently come to mind, but I have a strong suspicion that you may already have that covered. Fraternal regards from one Coney Island baby to another. Now, it may seem a side issue, but I think it's worth going into a little bit. Again, this is something that Mind Unveiled's talked about a lot, and also Guy Anderson, the aforementioned Rise of the Clones. Again, I just read, and they got a whole chapter around this. But the Coney Island babies, it is intriguing because there's this whole thing, and this was the third time they'd done it. But all these things about the world fairs, and of course, there's so much where people seeing the world fairs as being examples of, some people say, old Tartarian places, buildings, and it was like, oh, these are supposedly built for the world fairs, and then so many of them got burnt down or destroyed soon after. And the idea, it was all to do with some reset to like change people's perception and erase these elements of history. I'm not saying that was the case. It's interesting, and there does seem a lot to unpack there. Just this element is within that is interesting as well, which is again is talked about by Guy Anderson and Mind Unveiled as being an example of this sort of, well, potentially cloning. Around the turn of the into end of the 19th into the 20th century, with these world fairs, and these so the incubator became invented by, let me just get my notes. So I believe it was a Frenchman. I do apologize, I've just lost my notes a little bit, Bear with me a moment. So apparently, after the first invention of these incubators, which someone came up with after they were looking at chicken incubators, where they just used to have these things that keep warm to for chickens and their eggs. And so, sorry, do apologize, I've got there in the end. So the incubators, when they were displayed at the World Fairs, they were put on display by this chap, Dr. Martin Cooney, originally from Germany, supposedly, became known as the incubator doctor. He set up his sideshow attraction known as the Infantorium at Coney Island, where visitors could pay to see premature babies in incubators. This unique exhibition not only drew crowds, but also served a critical purpose. The entrance fees helped fund the care of these vulnerable infants who were often dismissed by hospitals as unfit for survival. From the late 19th century to the early 1940s, Cooney's exhibit featured rows of incubators filled with tiny premature babies, some weighing as little as 2 pounds. The attraction was both a spectacle and a medical marvel, as it provided care that was otherwise unavailable to these infants at the time. Cooney's methods were groundbreaking, utilising the latest technology in neonatal care to save lives. Public's fascination with the incubator babies was immense. Visitors to Coney Island would often hear barkers inviting them to see the miracle of life as they entered the exhibit. The display not only educated the public about premature births, but also helped to change perceptions about the viability of these infants. Cooney is credited with saving over 6,500 babies during his career, significantly contributing to the field of neonatology. The significant advancement in medical technology inspired by earlier designs developed in France provided a controlled environment to help premature infants survive critical early days. This is obviously all from a website that was all the very positive mainstream theory about what this guy was doing and the importance of these incubators. But then this website does add at the end, but that's not the end of the story. Further investigation years later discovered that Cooney was actually born Martin Cohen, or Kohn, in Prussia. Although he said he studied medicine in Leipzig and Berlin, there was no evidence he actually was enrolled there. One author claimed Cooney was too young when he emigrated to the US to have studied with Pierre Boudin, who is the inventor of the incubator. There is a question whether he actually was at the Berlin's World Fair at all. In the 1910 census, Cooney reportedly listed his occupation as surgical instruments. But in 1930, his occupation on the census was physician. Thus, Cooney's entire background history may have been fraudulent, and if so, he could have potentially faced arrest. There is a possibility that Cooney imitated Alexandre Leon, a European inventor who improved Tarnier's initial incubator designs and started running infant incubator exhibits at international exhibitions. However, despite all that possibly being true, Cooney's contributions to premature infant care and the thousands of infants whose lives he saved cannot be denied. So we have a positive upbeat there. It's just like this guy's whole life was a lie. Even his name was a lie. He probably wasn't actually a doctor. And it sort of dropped in there as but he saved loads of thousands of babies and he pioneered this science, and it's all great. And it's just like one of those fact check sites. It's like, oh yeah, there's this, that, and the other, but this, and we'll just ignore all of that. But it is a strange concept. This guy was obviously a fraud. He was nothing what he said he was. he was responsible for these thousands of babies being in these incubators, in these world fairs. And so this Coney Island, I say, was the third, but they went all around the world. This idea of very young, premature babies, vulnerable babies, being on display as an exhibit, it's a very strange concept in itself, and it's all these bound up all these things, you know, sort of media and showmanship and deception, with supposedly with medicine and science at the forefront, the groundbreaking technology. It does raise so many questions. And as I say, that this strange that this woman, Michelle Riley, fraternal regards, which as my novelle talked about, that's like a secret society type of a remark, from one Coney Island baby to another, suggests, okay, it might just be a reference to the place Coney Island, but again, a reference to something where a lot of people feel it's something in the past where perhaps cloning was used. It's an interesting aside. Maybe I've spent too much time on it, but at the same time, I think it is important because, again, it binds up these things that we're seeing and what we've just been talking about within the Epstein files. There's supposedly cutting edge science and medical procedures, shall we say, but it's completely done in an unethical way. As Guy Anderson was talking in the book, it's like, you know, there's sort of reference, oh yeah, women, the mothers gave permission for the babies to be on display sometimes, but it's, you know, maybe not entirely clear always where the babies came from, what happened to them afterwards, who was taking care of them. It's just a whole weird concept. And yeah, and then this was at Luna Park in Coney Island in 1903, and the park burnt down afterwards. And as I say, that was a common thing with the fairs. A few had big fires that destroyed them or were destroyed anyway. Just another very weird concept, which is just a little side reference from the files. Let me keep going. Let me get rid of his strain. I mean, just looking at the way he's holding those kids, it's like you'd see on a Punch and Judy show. Like they got me little puppets here on one on each hand, sort of thing. Very strange, to say the least. Now, this email from Michelle Riley that I just quoted, where Epstein had asked for fun projects, and soon after, Joshua Bach, who I'm going to go into in a minute, he replied, there were some more ideas: Shadow Research, Planning Academy, Scientific Visionaries, and some trustworthy funding administration folks project future research addendas and new disciplines. A series of workshops focusing on neglected knowledge, such as Russian psychopharmacology, Thai architecture, Buddhist psychology, Chinese opinion control. A network of media people that can be used to efficiently place and coordinate friendly items in our corrupt opinion market, or that may be used to keep opposing parties in check. Use AI and machine learning for predicting macroeconomic and political trends, your own climate and weather model of the global economy. Psychedelic retreats for groups of select individuals with the explicit goal to create a tightly knit but disentrenched group of individuals capable of radically rethinking and influencing global affairs. a cryptographically secure social network for highly relevant individuals, a news agency specifically designed to amplify signal in the noise and to eliminate opinion bias as far as possible. There are some more that I would not want to put into an email. I am very curious for your own ideas if you'd like to share some. So again, so much within that, from looking at ancient knowledge stuff, but so much there just going on from the Coney Island babies and this the world fairs. You know, the talk there openly. Well, I say openly, it's in an email that obviously they didn't plan on becoming public knowledge, but about influencing public opinion, about controlling the media, which we all know is a thing, of course. But it again, it's putting out there, but it's about controlling minds, and it's in so many different levels. It's like the macro level of controlling how people think in terms of the media and technology with the internet, etc. But then there's also the way of actually trying to physically alter people's consciousness or to alter genetics so that people are produced who think in a certain way. So all of these things. Now this chap, so who wrote that, Joshua Bach, he was born in Germany. Oh, sorry, do apologize. Let me get the full bio for you. Just got a... So he's another one of these science whiz kids. So he was born in Weimar, East Germany. That seems like a notable place in history, Weimar Republic. 21st of December, winter solstice, 1973. But yeah, he feels cognitive science, artificial intelligence, computer science. He's been at Harvard, MIT, which is where I think this Michelle Riley, she used to lecture there, although they're very keen now on their website. She doesn't teach you anymore. Interesting what he's credited of being involved in, or his research, shall we say. As I say, artificial intelligence, cognitive science, mental representation, emotion, social modeling, philosophy of mind. His research aims to bridge cognitive science and AI by studying how human intelligence and consciousness can be modeled computationally. So again, you've got this idea of things being consciousness, human consciousness, all consciousness being like a computer model. Did research on emotion modeling and artificial minds. His doctoral work focused on developing micro-psi, a cognitive architecture designed to simulate human-like reasoning and decision-making processes. So, his concept of cyber animism proposes that consciousness may be a form of self-organizing software. I hate it as where they use technological terms for life. It's from the get-go. I know I know there's some people who have a wider arching theory on this, that we're all created by alien beings or whatever, but the technology, AI, robotics or whatever, is created by humans. So living conscious things that haven't, They then make the technology. So the idea then to frame those living things in computational or technological terms, they're trying to twist it the other way around. But we, the humans, had to arrive at this consciousness, however that happened, to make software or hardware, if that makes any sense. So he cyber animism, he proposes that consciousness may be a form of self-organizing software that exists not only in human brains, but potentially in artificial systems and throughout nature. So it's basically saying there's no difference between the artificial and natural brains, whether that's animal or human. To try and phrase it here, I mean, this is just from Wikipedia, but this idea revives ancient animist notions about spirits in nature, but reinterprets them through a modern computational lens. Now, in one sense, that would seem to be, in one sense, that would seem to be something we could, well, say we could get on board with, but reviving ancient animist notions about spirits, interesting. But again, as I say, talking about them in terms of software, that's reductionist to me. And I know even, like, you know, people like who I value the work of, like David Icke, say that we're all in a simulation. So I suppose you could argue this is further evidence of that, or further, or people supporting that in one respect. I don't quite feel it. I mean, I'm ready to go with, if you, I mean, it's been an ancient thing in like Hindu belief, amongst others, the sort of Vedanta, this idea that or is it Maya, that you know, the world that we experience is an illusion. So I can go with it in that sort of. It's the idea that we're in just a giant computer program. To me, again, that sort of is just it's just another way of trying to reduce things into terms of computers and technology. Buck suggests that consciousness could be a kind of software running in the brain, and wonders if similar programs might exist in plants or even entire ecosystems. He draws parallels between the self-organizing principles observed in biology and the potential for similar processes to occur in artificial intelligence systems, leading to the emergence of consciousness. Bach argues in favor of blurring the lines between human, artificial, and natural intelligence. He believes that consciousness might be more widespread and interconnected than what was ever thought possible. The concept also suggests that ancient concepts of spirits may actually refer to self-organizing software agents, and that consciousness itself could be a simple training algorithm for such systems. Now, in some ways, and funny enough, as I was reading this, I started to think of Sheldrake. Although I'm only a little way through this, and I've read some other things, but his idea of like these, I believe, morphic fields. So it is an idea that there is consciousness that's outside of our brains, and that everything, that things are linked, like different organisms of the same type have fields where they're all linked, and that can be over massive distances. This idea that's been studied, where, you know, the kind of thing, and you know, these are things that have come through experimental testing, where sort of like a particular species of rat that's in one part of the world can learn how to get through a maze or do a certain thing, and then something of that, a creature of the same species in a completely different country then picks up the same thing quicker. Things like that. the idea that things can be connected by fields, and that is, and then this is also a time related thing, that that these fields, it will also, the learned behavior in one generation will then pass on to future generations. So this is, as I say, when Sheldrake was saying that genetics, the genes can't hold all of these things, all of the memory, if you like, especially when you know, in the natural world, you've got these incredible, yes, Rachel, like the 100 monkey effect. It is that sort of thing. So in one sense, I think there's a lot in Sheldrake's work, and I don't think Sheldrake necessarily would want to be lumped in with these, because so much of what, I mean, he's often dismissed by a lot of the mainstream science, because I guess they see what he's talking about as a quasi religious, spiritual way of looking at things. I mean, he's very much a hard scientist, but again, these are things like plasma, like quantum, where things that were previously just seen as the realm of the supernatural and mythology, mysticism, these things have been given scientific base, whether it's theoretical or it's practical science. So that, to me, is the positive science of, you know, really exploring these areas. So in the one sense, what they're saying there, I think is I think there are these fields, but again, it's that term, that way of looking at it, just that we're all just like a software program. That I don't like. And of course, from extension, like, he believes that, and of course he's developing AI systems, and he then doesn't see any difference from an AI system, and of course, like, obviously the internet is, I suppose, like a big field in that way now. But again, he doesn't want a distinction between artificial intelligence and the natural. And this is all, obviously, these people are wanting to develop robotics, transhumanism, and they don't want us to see a distinction between the machine and the human, because they want to propose that they want, as has been mentioned with countless things in the mainstream, you know, the whole Harari hackable humans sort of thing, obviously Musk with his Neuralink, which has been mentioned a lot in these sort of respects. But the idea that they're wanting there to be a blurring, because they're wanting us to be plugged in to the digital, this whole thing that they're trying to propose with digital ID. They want us to be connected to a virtual world. They want us to be disconnected from the human and from the natural. Yeah, I'm sorry if this has been a tough thing to go through for some people in the chat. It is, there's no way of getting around it. It's incredibly shocking stuff. But I think people need to know what's happening. This is this Avatar 2045 Avatar project. This is another tech billionaire chap that was connected with Epstein, Dmitry Itskov, a Russian billionaire, says we could all be immortal, and this is about his project, his Avatar project 2045. The different stages on there. So this is again, and lots of talk about this in the Epstein files, about the idea of uploading someone's consciousness. So the idea of immortality. So the idea of being able to replicate someone's consciousness. And again, I think Liz and I have talked about this before, but you get all these things on Black Mirror, a lot of the science fiction. Someone's consciousness gets uploaded and then they die, or they're in a coma, but they're basically living like a life in a virtual reality, but it's exactly the same as our world. And basically, as far as they know, they're just living their world, and they've become immortal because now they're like in a computer program. They will never die, and they will all live this eternal life, but in a virtual reality, not in terms of a soul going through another dimension or some sort of ascending. And I just don't think that they can do it. I mean, I'm not even sure that they can ever do it. I mean, there was a clip of Musk that Mind Unveiled showed when someone asked him about this, and he was saying, well, there'd be like snapshots from like a Neuralink thing, so it would get bits of people's memories and behaviors, and then we can sort of upload that in time to sort of a robot type thing. But obviously you won't be the same because you'll be in a robot for a start. But also you'll just have snapshots of people's memories and behavior. And that's so much of that is what this is. There can be snapshots, so there can be things where it's replicating people's voices and how they look even on a screen. But it's not going to be the same person. And so this mad billionaire has got this plan by 2040, 45, a hologram like avatar. So that's the upper goal. Before that, an avatar with an artificial brain in which a human personality is transferred at the end of one's life. Before that, in actual a time that's gone, so not even sure they've got there. I don't think, well, not officially. An avatar in which a human brain is transplanted at the end of one's life. And the prior one, a robotic copy of a human body remotely controlled via BCI. Now, it's funny because I was thinking about Sheldrake when I was reading that earlier stuff, and then it was actually mentioned that Epstein had exchanged an email with this Russian billionaire Itskov with a link to this experiment thing from Sheldrake, a telepathy test. That not Sheldrake isn't in the Epstein files, but it was just interesting that they sent a link. So as I say, they may be accepting a little bit of the fact that just by replicating, just by fiddling with people's genes, or even with that poor girl getting certain genetic traits in terms of appearance and teaching the kid music and all these different abilities, with the aim that then that will be passed on to this life. Life doesn't work like that, all these attempts by these mad scientists and these corrupt and sick billionaires to make humanity into a different kind of thing, it's going to be inferior. It's not going to be life. It's not going to be humanity. I think that's the crucial thing that we need to fight back on with this. I think they're a bit deluded. I think, and who knows, maybe there's also a little bit of the Coney Island baby showmanship with this as well, even perhaps in the way that they put these files out. Because they want us to believe they can do that, and all these science fiction things that come out there, they want us to believe that they can do it. But I don't know if they can. Now, this isn't it. I obviously got so much from Mind Unveiled, so I'm giving homage to them. But I was looking through the Epstein files myself on the Department of Justice website, and I found this really long email. Subject, my friend George. So I think this is probably that George Church guy, the CRISPR technology expert. It's a really long email, and some of it's difficult to unpack, but I'm just going to try and go through it, maybe to sort of pretty much finish up on. So this is him sort of thinking out loud, and like I say, sometimes it's not, it's a bit garbled what they're saying. I am a machine that thinks, made of atoms, a perfect quantum simulation of a many-body problem, a 1029 problem. I, robot, am dangerously capable of self-reprogramming and preventing others from cutting off my power supply. We human machines extend our abilities via symbiosis with other machines, expanding our vision to span wavelengths beyond the mere few nanometers visible to our ancestors. I'm going to interject there for a start. Our ancestors, looking at research people have done on the ancient sites just down the road for a start, our ancestors, and I mean, I'm going back a ways, I think their vision was way beyond the few nanometers that he's talking about there, and that we have now for many of our cases. I think there's so much way back which we're not even close to touching now. Expanding our vision to span wavelengths beyond the mere nanometers visible to our ancestors, out to the full electromagnetic range from picometer to megameter. We hurl 370 kilogram hunks of our hive past the sun at 252,792 kilometers per hour. Just talking about the Earth going around the sun. We extend our memory and math by a billionfold with our silicon prosthesis. So just talking about the machines that we make to supposedly, to extend our memory and our mathematical ability with AI, basically, with machines, silicon prosthesis. Yet our bio brains are 1,000-fold more energy efficient than our inorganic brains at tasks where we have common ground, like facial recognition and language translation. Yeah, the things that make you human, which aren't just computational, just computational things or figures. Machines can do those. Although there's some people that can do them as quick, so that capability is deep in their brains as well. But anyway, and the bio brains, as he would call it, are infinitely better for tasks of as yet unknown difficulty, like Einstein's Annus Mirabilis papers. He's going to mention a lot of stuff here which I'm not familiar with, or out-of-the-box inventions impacting future centuries. As Moore's law heads from 20 nm transistor lithography down to 0.1 nm atomic precision, and from 2D to 3D circuits, we may downplay reinventing and simulating our biomolecular brains and switch to engineering them. We can back up petabytes of silly brains. There's some silly brains going on here, but silicon brains perfectly in seconds. But transfer of information between carbo brains takes decades. So that's carbo brains. I suppose that's just us, because we're the carbon they want to reduce. Takes decades, and the similarity between the copies is barely recognizable. Some speculate that we could translate from carbo to silly, and even get the silly version to behave like the original. So this is the idea of machines to copy the human. And there is stuff also in the documents about, for example, David Hansen. I'm going to show a picture of Sophia, I think, in a minute, who made that Sophia the robot. He's also in the Epstein files. And there was talk, oh, maybe you could make a robo Epstein. So talking about making a copy of the original. However, such a task requires much deeper understanding than merely making a copy. We harnessed the immune system via vaccines in 10th century China and 18th century Europe, long before we understood cytokines and T-cell receptors. We do not yet have a medical nanorobot of comparable agility or utility. It may turn out that making a molecularly adequate copy of a 1.2 kilogram brain or a 100 kilogram body is easier than understanding how it works. Yeah, that's the thing. They so often like, oh yeah, we can do this and we can replicate that, but they don't really understand how these, well, consciousness for a start works. This is far more radical than human cloning, yet does not involve embryos. So this is the idea of just, I think the idea of maybe uploading things onto machines. But this idea of like robot selves, what civil rights issues arise with such hybrid machines? A bio brain of yesteryear with nearly perfect memory, which could reconstruct a scene with vivid prose, paintings, or animation was permissible, often revered. But we hybrids, mutts today, so he's calling himself a hybrid on us. Maybe he means just because we use technology, so it's like part of us. And obviously they want to make it more that we've got implants, so we're fully connected. But we hybrids with better memory talents are banned from courtrooms, situation rooms, bathrooms, and private conversations. Goes into a few other strange ideas. We are currently far from universal suffrage. We discriminate based on maturity and sanity. If I copy my brain / body, does it have a right to vote, or is it redundant? Consider that the copies begin to diverge immediately, or the copy could be intentionally different. In addition to passing the maturity, sanity, humanity test, perhaps the copy needs to pass a reverse Turing test, a church Turing test. Rather than demonstrating behavior indistinguishable from a human, the goal will be to show behavior distinct from human individuals. So I think really what they're saying about the idea of creating replica humans or robot copies is that they can then be more easily, well, unfortunately natural humans can be quite easily led, but when it's all robotic, they can be reprogrammed. Perhaps more copies of specific memes, minds, and brains will come to represent the will of we, the hybrid people of the world. Would such future Darwinian selection lead to disaster or to higher emphasis on humane, empathy, aesthetics, elimination of poverty, war, and disease, long-term planning, evading existential threats on even millennial timeframes? Perhaps the hybrid brain route is not only more likely, but also safer than either a leap to an unprecedented, unevolved, purely silicon-based brains, or sticking to our ancient cognitive biases with fear-based, fact-resistant voting. So maybe he's saying there, maybe he's thinking, well, maybe we're not going to ever get a full robot copy that's going to function as a human. But he doesn't think that us as humans without any enhancement, shall we say, is very good or is very limited. So he's saying they're about a hybrid. So I guess that is that's transhumanism. So that's the idea that humanity will go to another level, but only if it incorporates the machine, incorporates AI within itself, so that's a hybrid. That's a new, talking about Darwin there, you know, that's what a lot of these people seem to think is the new end goal of evolution. It's that the humans, or these certain elite humans, need to intervene to make these new hybrids, the transhumanism, a different form of humanity. And there's Sophia, as I say, David Hansen, someone mentioned in the files that had meetings with Epstein, was one of these many expert scientists in all these different fields, AI, robotics, genetics, and he created Sophia, famous, like this robot was given citizenship by Saudi Arabia, which led to various jokes at the time, like, you know, Saudi Arabia wouldn't let women drive cars, but they gave a female-looking robot citizenship, you know. But yeah, as I say, Epstein was talking in emails with other people about, oh, you could maybe make a robot Epstein, a copy of Epstein. So again, this is the forefront of what these people are planning. And an interesting little aside, just to connect again with the occult, my novel, and I looked it up myself, he's sort of like his resume, CV, this David Hansen, this robotics expert, and there's obviously like pages of stuff and all these technical things he's done and all these organizations he's been a part of. And it just mentions a line, OTO, from whatever year to present. And my novel saying OTO, the I forget what it's called, Order Templis, sorry, artist, sorry, I can't remember what it's called, but OTO, you know, it's the organization. Crowley at one point became the leader. You know, it's again another one of these secret, not so secret, but you know, it's again a society that's involved with the occult. And there's this hardcore scientist, say, just embedded amongst everything else, that he's part of that, and he's also just at the forefront of robotics. I'll just finish up on this. Another little, just an interesting thing. Again, it's one of these, oh, you're a mad conspiracy theorist, so I'm probably like digging too deeply. But I was wondering, the Zorro Ranch, the name Zorro, and obviously there's the character, like in the comic books, films, Zorro, the masked man, and he was like a force for good, you know, trying to get rid of the bad guys. You know, he was a bit of a template for superheroes to come in the future, like Batman, the masked warrior, you know, defeating the bad guys. And so I just, you know, wonder, you know, I just googled what does Zorro mean, and it's Spanish for fox, or it's like a South American fox stroke dog creature. And then Liz mentioned, oh, Fox, there's something around gematria or something like that about 666. And I was looking at that. I mean, obviously gematria, originally like the Hebrew and Greek gematria. So this person anyway on this website, ridingthebeast.com, to the form of English gematria. So the English word fox equals 666, apparently. It's the shortest and neatest word with a value of 666 in English gematria because F equals 6, O equals 60, and X equals 600. This word occurs only once in any English New Testament. It's in Luke 13:32, where Jesus has just been warned that King Herod seeks to kill him, and Jesus says, go and tell that fox. Now, because Herod sought to kill Jesus, he was clearly a type of Antichrist. So Jesus himself described an Antichrist king with an ancient word that meant fox. That fact harmonizes remarkably well with the fact that fox equals 666 in English. Not only that, but look at the verse number in Luke where the word fox appears. The verse number 1332 is very reminiscent of the number 1332, which is often read in the same way as 1332, and 1332 is exactly 2 times 666. I get boggled. My mind gets boggled often with a lot of these things in gematria, and so I'm not, not saying all this is a secret code, but it came up. And I was interested as well because I was reading on. We also have these gematria associations to 1332. And then a bit further on, gematria coincidences relating to the word fox help corroborate this form of English gematria as a relevant source of possible hints about the meaning of the 666 in Revelation 13:18, and one can find other hints and corroborations such as 666 equals a beast organism. Go further on, the man, an atheist, atheistic animal, the horrible demon, the perfect fiend, repeating digit, a perfect proof, the beast's me, the beast's mad, number of an image, I am a graven image, I think I am me, the image, I think I am the mad image, I am the thinking I am, Satan's brain image, beast program, for artificial brain, artificial beast. And what are these? What was the plan at Zorro Ranch? What was the plan of Epstein? Whether you call it Satanism or obviously with the Jewish connections, talk about Kabbalah, gematria. We know all these encoding things go on. I'm not saying that was why he called it Zorro Ranch. Maybe these are just something that is in the simulation. It's in the code, but I would rather say in the consciousness, or the twinkly sky water, as Liz used to say. But let's finish up on, because I'm such a soft hippie that I always try and end on a positive. But as I say, the Zorro, the superhero, trying to fight the bad guys. But that's the most important thing. Like I say, I think the essential thing is just to try and keep our humanity, despite all the best efforts of those people, whether it's media manipulation, technology, all the sick things that they do, which are anti-human and anti-natural law. So we need to keep our humanity, and that's the best way to fight back against what these people are doing, because I don't think that they can replicate life. And I think there's things in there, a bit like in that email the long one that Epstein was reading, that they can't copy life. They can't copy life. They can make some inferior copies that do resembling things that look a bit like a living human, but it's not life. And they can't crack that. They'll keep trying, like alchemists of the day gone by, trying to create a homunculus in a glass jar, which they will see as having the ways to give them power over everything, like this black alchemist that Andrew Collins was conflicting with in the 80s, the time of the Satanic Panic, funny enough. So much happened in the 80s. That will be a further live stream. But that'll be all for tonight. I'm sorry if it's given a few people nightmares, but keep the humanity going, and that's the best defense we have against everything else. Thank you for sticking with me and sticking with us all. Like, share, subscribe, and love. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, friends, and we'll join again soon.